In this tutorial, I am going to show you how to use motion tweening to create animation in Flash or Adobe Animate. Motion tweening allows us to take Flash symbols and to set the keyframes for those symbols and then let Flash figure out all the in-between frames. That's why it's called tweening. So we have to begin with some kind of image. We could import an image or just draw one ourselves. So I'm going to draw the sun. I'm going to have the sun and the moon move across the sky here. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit. And I'm just starting it off the stage because I'm going to turn it into a symbol. It doesn't really matter where I draw it. But I'm going to go ahead and draw the sun. I'll pause it for a second and then come back when I'm done drawing the sun. Okay, now selecting shapes in Flash is weird. If I just click, if I'm using my selection tool, the shortcut key for that is V. If I just click, it's only going to choose contiguous similar colors, so any colors that are the same and touching each other. If I double click, it will choose any colors that are touching, but that still leaves these ones. So if I want to select all of something, which I really need to to be able to turn this into a symbol, I need to draw a selection box around all of them. Now Flash is very specific about its selection boxes. It will literally only take the things that are inside of the box. So you need to be really careful that you select all of it. If you miss anything that you've drawn in here, that will cause problems later because this symbol can be the only thing on this layer for your motion tween to work, and it will warn you if it's not. But I'm going to select all of it and press F8. And that allows me to convert it into a symbol. So now when I type in, I'll give it a name, sun, and don't worry right now about movie clip. We'll talk about that later, registration. I'm just going to say OK, and that will turn it into a symbol. I know it's a symbol because it has a bounding box around it. I can now just click on it once and it's selected. Now it's really easy to do this. If you double click on that box, you actually go back into the shape that's within the symbol, and your timeline will change because it's the timeline for that. If this happens, if you accidentally get back to where this is a shape, you can either just double click anywhere else to get out of it or click this back arrow here, up here near the top, and you'll see that this is telling you I'm in scene 1, but I'm also in the sun symbol, so I can click back out to go back to just scene 1. I can also press Q on my keyboard or click on this free transform tool to resize and scale and rotate. If I grab the corner and hold down Shift as I do so, I can resize this to any size that I want. And now we're ready to go. I am also going to double click on this layer 1 and rename it sun because I don't want to get confused when I have a lot of different kinds of layers. Now the first thing I need to do is add frames to this keyframe. I don't want to create a new keyframe, I just want to extend this one, and I can do that by pressing F5 or even by just clicking on the frame I want to go to and by pressing F5 there. So for example, I want my sun to go across the sky in 3 seconds. My animation is at 24 frames per second, so 3 seconds would be 72 frames. So I'm going to click on frame 72 and press F5, and that will extend it, or I can just hold down F5. And if that isn't the right timing, if I don't like it, it's actually really easy to change it later. Now to turn this into a motion tween, 3 steps. First, I have to have a symbol. It has to be on its own layer, and I have to have an extended set of frames. Once I have that, I can right-click on anywhere on those frames and choose the very top option, which is Create Motion Tween. I know it's a motion tween now because it's blue. Blue is what Flash uses to let you know that it's a motion tween. And what that means now is it's set up to automatically set keyframes for me when I make a change. For example, I want the sun to be on the other side of this stage on frame 72. I move my timeline indicator to frame 72, and I drag the sun to where I want it to be at that point. I'm holding down Shift so it stays in a straight line. And you'll notice that down here now there is a new keyframe set that happened automatically just because I made a change at that point. Now I have a path. This represents Flash's figuring out all the in-between frames for me, and each of those dots represents a frame that Flash has created. And if I play this now, you will see that it is straight across. Now I can adjust this path. If I'm not clicked on anything and I click and drag, I have to be on the selection tool, not the free transform, so I have to go back to V. But I can click and drag on this path and adjust it so that it arcs. So I can drag this up so that my sun arcs through a path. And now it'll follow that path still of moving across the sky. Now I can do any number of scales or rotates or movement changes in this set of frames now. Now say if I want it to be faster, Sometimes when you click on this, it selects everything, especially if you haven't been clicked on it before. Holding down Control will let you choose individual things. I can make it slower by extending the length between the frames by pressing F5. I can press Shift F5 to make it faster. There's a lot of things that I can change in here. If I go to an earlier frame and I move where the sun is, it is going to add that to my path. So now it wants to go up at first, it slides back down. There's a lot of changes that I can make right in here. For example, I want my sun to kind of wobble back and forth as it goes. All I have to do is say, okay, on maybe frame 15, I'm going to press Q now and rotate the sun a little bit right there. And it will add that rotation to the animation. Now maybe at frame 30, I'll rotate it the other way. I'm going just past the edge. And then at frame 45, we'll go back. And by now it should be off of the frame 60. And now it'll add those rotation frames right inside of here. If I press Control Enter, I can see a swift preview of that animation, and it'll loop it for me too, so I can see it just repeating over and over again. And if I decide, you know what, I don't like how quickly that animation is rotating, or I don't like it at all, I can always Control click on any of these keyframes. I can go to clear keyframes and actually just get rid of them, and it'll go back to before that happened. I can also Control click on a keyframe and drag it. If I drag 2 frames closer, what happens between them will happen more quickly. If I drag them further apart, it'll be more slowly. So let's say I want to remove this keyframe and drag all of these out so that they're a little further apart. That would slow down the rotation animation. So now when I play it, now I have that. Now I want to add another motion tween. I have to put it on a separate layer. And I do that by clicking on this new layer button here. This one I'm going to call Moon, and I don't want it to start until after the sun is off the screen. So somewhere over here I want to press F7 to create a new keyframe, and I know it's a keyframe because of the dot, which means everything, this is a keyframe also, but it's empty. That's why it's dark gray. There's nothing on this layer until frame 71 in my case. It's I think a really good practice to always lock every other layer except for the one that you're working on, and I can lock a layer by clicking this dot right here, which turns on the lock, and so now I can't accidentally select my sun layer. I can even turn the visibility of the sun layer off so it isn't in my way, and now I can create another shape that I turn into a symbol by pressing F8. Now I've already made one, so here's my moon right here. So I'm going to set the moon right there, and I'm going to have it go another 3 seconds, which would be to frame 144. Now I pressed F5. Now I have 3 seconds worth of frames here on this next layer. I can right-click and create a motion tween, and I'm going to do the process again. By the end of that next 3 seconds, I want the moon to go across. I want to back to my selection tool so that I can bend the arc of the moon. And now, when the sun's gone, the moon's going to have its turn. And if I want to do the same thing with the moon, I can make any changes that I want to it just by going to the frame where I want it to change. I mean, I could say, you know what, I want the moon to be over here at frame 85. And it's going to add, kind of weird, but it'll add that motion to the moon. Control Z that. But I can do or even just right click and clear that frame. But I can add those rotational elements to this too. Just by adding more keys, and it's really easy. You just make the change. And if it's motion tween, it'll do it automatically for you. When I play this now, looks like I probably want my moon to arc a little bit more. Oh, I should have done that before I set the keys. It's going to cause some issues. And to finish out this first part of the tutorial, let's add it getting dark at night as the sun goes away and the moon comes out. Now, I can change the color of the stage. If I click on basically nothing, then I get the properties for the stage, and I can change the color of the stage here. The problem with that is that you're stuck with that color. You can't really do anything else with it without changing the color that it is in every part of your scene. And so I think it's a lot better just to draw a shape that we can then turn into a symbol that's a color. So I'm going to create a new layer below all the others. So I'll make a new layer and drag it underneath, and I'm going to call this one Sky. And then I'm going to use the rectangle tool here to create a background. I'm going to make sure it's exactly the same size as my stage, because it can be really easy if you make a large rectangle, say, larger than the stage, it's easy to forget how big your stage was, and so you start drawing stuff that's off of here, and anything out here in the gray won't show up when you make a JPEG sequence or a SWF unless you drag it out. So it's important to keep that the same. Also, I don't want to have a stroke line. This pencil one represents the outside line that it'll automatically create around your shape, and I'm just setting it to none by clicking there so that there isn't one. Now I'll choose the color I want the sky to be, and then I can just drag a box, and it should snap to the edge. Try that one again. And we're going to turn this into a symbol. And I'll call that symbol Sky. I select it, hit F8, call it Sky. And the sky now, when you create a new layer, it automatically fills all the frames that you have up to that point. So it already has made that sky symbol last for 144 frames. All I need to do now is right click on it and say create motion tween. And after I've done that, now I can animate this. But I'm not going to do any movement or scale or rotations. I'm going to click on it and select properties. And you may not have this open, but if you open color effect, there are several different color effects that we can also animate. There's alpha, which is transparency. There's brightness and tint. So I can change this so that as it becomes nighttime, so maybe by here, it's completely dark. So I'm going to go forward to frame 71 or maybe a little earlier than that. Click on this and change the style brightness. I'm going to set the brightness to 0 so that it gradually, now it's going to tween that brightness change from 100% bright to 0 bright. My problem is I don't want it to start getting dark so early, maybe until here. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to maybe here and set the brightness back to 100 here. Or, whoops, maybe not 100. I should have set it to a brightness of 0 because it's from 0 to negative 100%. So now I have two keyframes where it doesn't change. It stays at brightness of 0 from here to here, and then it starts to get dark here. And I can do the same thing. If I want it to be able to loop near the end here, I want it to go back up to 0 brightness. And I'm also probably going to have to, I don't want it to start getting bright so early because it always just does between your last two keyframes. So I need to set another frame maybe right here. And another thing, you have to click on your symbol, even if it, you click on something else, you click on the symbol so you can get back to the properties. And I'll set that back to negative 100. So now when I play this, and I have my animation starting. Now there's a lot of other things that we're going to add in part 2, so keep an eye out for that one, and just kind of mess around with motion tweens. We'll talk about eases next time. We'll talk about using the alpha transparency. We'll do a little bit of parallax scrolling, and those are all things that we'll do also in motion tweening.